And that wraps up another powerful episode of Surviving Abuse. I want to extend my deepest gratitude to our incredible guests for sharing their transformative journey with us today. Join us next week as we dive into the healing process and share more incredible stories of triumph and resilience. Hello and welcome to Surviving Podcast. I'm excited about the guest we have today. Miss Evelyn, thank you for being here.
Thank you, David. It's my pleasure.
I like to try to make a sandwich with my show because we talk about some deep, dark, heavy stuff. And I want people to walk away feeling inspired. So I talk about something positive and end on something positive because that middle stuff can sometimes get a little dark and heavy.
Sure.
You have some amazing things going on and you've got your hands in a lot of pots and making things happen. So tell us a little bit about you.
I am the CEO of Wired for Addiction, now Wired BioHealth, the inventor of the patent pending panel that we use, looking at 85 different biomarkers that are related to mental health and addiction. And that's what keeps me busy these days.
Yeah. My day job is helping people with mental health and medical stuff. And then I come to the studio and I'm talking about mental health. But I get so inspired by it. I get a high from it because we all battle with something. And one thing that I've learned through the past few years of dealing with my trauma and accepting mental health is that you cannot compare trauma. So I would like to start out with asking you about your own journey of trauma that you've dealt with and that you probably are still dealing with because I'm not sure it ever leaves us. Mm-hmm. One of the situations that arise is people will sometimes hear my story or someone else's and saying, but mine doesn't touch that, so I don't feel right coming onto your platform. And they want to almost belittle what they have went through. And I try to tell people what I went through is the hardest thing I have been through. What you've went through is the hardest thing you have been through. We can't compare those. So with your business, with the people that you mentor and give advice, what do you tell people when they try to compare?
That's a great point, Dave, because you cannot compare people's journeys through life, right? I tell people that we've all got trauma as part of being in this world. There's the big T's and there's the little T's, right? And it's how that affects you. Trauma is more than just a word to quantify a negative experience. It actually changes our physiology. That's the next step. That's what we actually do. We look at biomarkers from neurotransmitters, your brain chemicals and your hormones, from your stress hormones to your sex hormones, how those interact together, and then genetic biomarkers for what was within your DNA that now got turned on as a result of your trauma and expresses itself the way it does for you to experience how you're feeling as you live day to day. We're all different. We have 7.5 billion different sets of DNA with 7.5 billion different lives that we've all lived, yet we want to put everybody in the same place. We can't.
No, we cannot.
And the same goes for the treatment. It's got to be unique and individual to that person.
That's another thing that I try to reiterate is my journey through the potholes, the dips, the ups and the downs. It's working for me.
Right.
But again, my healing journey is mine. And so I want to provide those endless resources for you. Maybe you can take something from me. Maybe someone will take something from you and find their own journey.
Which is wonderful of you doing a podcast because people get to listen and maybe sound off when they're ready or just remain silent and keep hearing it and keep giving them more power to get their own life back. So it's conversations like this that's really helpful to people to start that.
Yeah. We've got to do the hard things, and that's talking about it. So, would you mind to give us a bit of your journey and trauma you've learned to take control of?
Sure. So I'll bring you to where we are today with our company and what we do. 35 years ago, I was practicing pain management in a rural area. And the approach was try this, try that, double it if it doesn't work. Let's double it again. Then maybe we'll half it. Then we'll try something different. Seeing people become somewhat dependent on that. 20 years after that, I'm in an urban area, but thinking, okay, things might be different. Same exact thing. Try this, try that, with no personal approach to anything. That's professionally. Personally, I marry a man who's an alcoholic, probably several addictions in reality. We have a child together. A year after she's born, we learn that he's adopted. I'm already seeing all of this behavior in him. And now I'm like, I have nothing to look at as to get information as to what I need to know for her, how I can possibly arm her with everything she needs in her life. So that was the personal and the professional to how I wound up doing the work that I do today to try to make something good out of all of that. And it was, all right, what do we do with what we've got and come out on the other side trying to be in a better place? Most people that we see in the addiction world, here's how it works, David, is we're not healthy one day and sick the next. It's all the living that we do in between that gets us to either end of that spectrum. The same goes for addiction. We're not healthy one day and addicted the next. It's our mental health piece in between that's getting us to either end of that spectrum. We're looking at people that either have a diagnosed condition not being treated properly, an undiagnosed condition, or trauma, or one, two, or all three of those. And we try to self-medicate. And that self-medication, whether you find a process addiction, be it gambling, be it sex, or a substance, that makes me feel good in that moment. And that works until it doesn't work. And then it becomes the next problem.
You know how sometimes you hear something that you've heard a million times over, but one day just hits you different?
Yep.
There is a song that I love, and one day after my attack, I listened to it, and there's a line that says, "You get used to the pain and numb to the sting so you don't feel anything." And that is a line that has never stood out to me as powerfully as it did until I needed to hear it.
Yep.
When you speak of addiction, it's not just substance abuse addiction. It can be those tangible, like physical, emotional addictions
Sure.
as well.
Absolutely, because those are going to change our physiology, just like the substance would change our physiology. Those gambling, that's people do it for the same reasons, to get that dopamine spike, to feel good in that moment, to get that rush, and then comes down. Just like if you ingested a substance, the same thing that would go on in your body. So whether it be a process addiction, as I said, or a substance, it's still self-medicating. For most people, it's at what point in your life did you find that it that you then brought into your life?
I'm very lucky that I'm an open gay man in the South. I was a victim of a brutal hate crime that went public, and I was the bad guy because I'm gay. I didn't know hate existed until 9 years ago. Gay wasn't a big issue with my family. We love David. They love my partner. It was never a thing. And so for my trauma to happen in my adult life, it would have been so easy for me to turn to drugs and alcohol. One day it hit me that I was not the only victim of what happened. My family was a victim. His family was also a victim. I was not able to protect myself when this man broke inside my house. Now I'm having to live at home again. And what if one of these people threatened me to find the job comes to finish? I would not be able to defend myself now. And that means I've now put my mother in danger or my grandmother in danger. And so I know there were so many times I was like, I just want to feel good again.
Sure.
And luckily, I had the support team. That is what made me feel good again. But what is so terrifying is, especially when it comes to people in abusive relationships and or households, when they don't have that positive, safe place.
Right. Absolutely. So tragic. People would probably find it hard to believe that in this day and age, that kind of level of hate
Yeah.
exists is beyond sickening.
Yeah.
When you tell your story, David, you have no idea of who's listening
Right.
and who you're helping. It's the power.
Yeah, sometimes I may record and I may not say anything about mine. And then sometimes I just let the universe work. Sometimes there's just that connection and that safe place.
Absolutely.
But you are very proactive in overcoming the traumas. I feel sometimes with the way that we have been brought up in society, especially when it comes to men, that you just hide everything. It's not real. Like men can't be
Right.
traumatized. And then there becomes all this like building these walls and not accepting it and not realizing what trauma actually. How do you let them know that maybe we should visit the word trauma and then let's get a path and a plan on how to accept it and overcome it?
Sure. So when people come to us, it's basically for the physiology component. We refer to team members who are trauma informed specialists who then have their client understand that if we get your physiology optimized, receiving and being able to work through the hard work becomes so much easier. If you are still with the anxiety and the depression and everything else that goes along with the trauma, it's very difficult to be able to take that in. So that's why that first step that we do is to work on the individual's physiology. Trauma is more than just a word to quantify a negative experience. It changes our physiology. So that's that first, like, let's get that foundation optimized. And then let's get into that talk work and get through it. But when you're open to receiving and hearing, it's so much easier.
Yeah. Yeah. It's comforting to hear that when the physiology is changed because of trauma, you can get that control back. You can control the
Sure.
narrative.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times, David, we go over an individual's lab results and they start crying tears of joy because they are now saying, you understand. I've been feeling this for so long and you understand exactly. And then once that becomes real, it's your DNA. Now we've got a path with a real plan.
I think that's so amazing because it gives that validation to people. When you talk about those tears of joy, that is so powerful. It's so cleansing, you
Yeah.
know?
And that validation is priceless.
Yeah.
Because for somebody that's been not feel like they're not being heard, they've been giving, you name it, and nothing is doing it. And then you're like, here's why. We even look at a particular single nucleotide polymorphism, which is a genetic error. For one of the genes that we look at, that would tell us that an SSRI may be ineffective for this individual anyway, but nobody's bothered to do the deep dive for this person to see what is really going to work for you, putting it all together.
But is trauma and addiction something that you can, would you put the word cure with that?
Somebody can become optimized to where they're living a healthy life. Yeah,
I love that.
it's possible.
One of the things that a lot of my listeners reach out to me about is people saying, I'm married to somebody or my child went through.
Mhm.
They don't know how to be completely supportive of the victim.
You bring up a great point, David, because we often ask a spouse, a partner, a loved one to be present if it's someone that's undergone a lot of trauma and then is on the mental health decline and or the addiction part of this. Say, would you be there while we go over these results? Because when the loved one hears this, all of a sudden it makes sense. And that level of support changes dramatically because all of a sudden it's, wow, I get it. All of a sudden they get it. And what that does for everybody is wonderful.
Yeah. What people reach out to me and they're like, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to understand this. When I can only speak from my experience, I'm so glad that my family doesn't know what it feels like to go
Right.
through the trauma that I went through. And I know that they're loving me the best they can. My partner and I just had our 5-year anniversary. My attack happened 9 years ago, the month of October. It was 4 years of my healing before he became a part of my life, but I'm still affected. Sometimes we could be laying in bed and his foot could touch my foot. Sometimes it's the sweetest thing. And sometimes I will break into sweats and I may have to go to the guest room.
Yep.
And there are times that he gets it, and there's times that he gets frustrated with it. And I've
Right.
got to be patient with that too, because it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where I wasn't the only victim. Even the people that I've not met today, but will maybe meet a year from now, will still have some repercussions of the traumatized David.
Sure. So it's that kind of hypervigilance. When we're talking about neurotransmitters, brain chemicals, we have two kinds, excitatory and inhibitory. And those create this fine orchestrated balance in our body. When those excitatories, because of a trauma, we've got way too many of those chemicals all the time now. That's when you're ready, you're loaded for bear. Like you said, he could just touch my toe in the slightest way, and you're back in that moment. And that's where doing the lab work and knowing the physiology makes so much sense.
Senses are so powerful, the sense of smell and hearing. And mine is hearing. Like there's a certain sound that I hear and it takes me right back to that. Like I have to be very mindful when I close cabinets.
It's all going to go hand in hand. Absolutely.
That is so amazing.
One of the reasons we started doing what we do at our company, David, is because within the mental health space and the addiction space, a stigma still exists. And we weren't using technology to advance this area of healthcare. That's why we created what we do. We had 16 years of research and development to get to what we do today. Technology wasn't being used. We talk about when families know this. We don't have the conversation of mental health issues and addiction. We need to know about this before any trauma conversation. That should be as normalized as any others.
What is your thoughts on generational abuse?
Sure. It's real. It becomes embedded into our physiology. There is work within the NIH and the World Health Organization and all of our biggest groups that study saying this research is real. It is embedded in our DNA. When you're born and here's your cards, and gosh, they look really familiar as to the folks that came before you in your lineage. And that generational trauma, not only is it in our physiology, then the actions often remain the same of generation to generation. You grow up in that environment, you take on those same behaviors, you're looking at the exact repeat.
Yeah. That is one thing that I had said about my attacker. I didn't know him. After court and sentencing was over, he did 4 months out of a 13-year sentence and never even made it to prison, and is not a registered sex offender. So he's living next door to your children today. And what always went through my mind, his mother did reach out to me and apologize and was like, this is not how we raised him. But one of the questions that I had is, what was he taught? And what was the generational factor that played into it? Because I don't think somebody woke up one day and was like, I'm going to go find a gay guy and kill him. And what scares me now is I don't think he is getting the mental health therapy he needs. He has children. And what scares me, what if one of those kids are gay? Because now everything's electronic. You Google me or
Right.
Google's their parents, and the assaulter of a hate crime is going to come up. And what if one of them is gay? And it makes me so worried. I always try to look for something positive.
Right.
And one of the positive things I can find throughout the hard years of COVID is it woke people mental health awareness and self-care. So I would love to hear if you found a difference within your line of work through things.
I agree with you. It made people more aware of their mental health, and that's a good thing. It made self-care not seem as taboo. The numbers just came out post-COVID from the Kaiser study. 53% of the population has anxiety and depression. We're looking at 80+% of people in reality. You can see that, how unkind people can treat each other. It's all of what society went through, David. Having these kind of conversations is so valuable for people to understand where we are as a society. This isn't just in the US. Because of what happened to everyone, you want to talk about big T's and little T's, those were for everyone. If you already had an underlying mental health condition and now you went through this, that's exacerbated.
Absolutely. When I hear of things happening to a child versus when it happened to me in my adult life, I already had a pretty healthy foundation. But when I hear things happening to a child and knowing that is what they're building their foundation on versus things happening at the time in life that happened to me, I just can't wrap my mind around it. How do we fix this?
I don't know that I have all the answers, but you bring up a great point. That foundation has to be there. So if you have children or children in your life, even if they're not your own, you are the role model. If someone needs help with their mental health, it's not shameful. It takes courage. That's the kind of courage you're showing a young person who's still building that foundation of what it should look like. And we have such an opportunity to do that right, even if it wasn't done correctly for us. Let's build it together and make it stronger. That's possible.
I want so badly for people who have platforms to use it. And I have seen where people have said, let's use Robin Williams. That's a name that most people know. You're a successful actor. You're so funny. No one is frowning around you. You lighten every room that you're in. And you chose to take your own life. And I don't even know the proper way to say that. I don't think there's any good way to say that. But if there is something that came out of that, it was the recognition of sometimes what is not the truth.
Someone who appears happy and always laughing and the life of the party may truly be just the opposite. And that's all a front until they're so tired of doing that, they can't do it anymore.
One of the realizations that I have with that is everyone wants to say, I'm not suicidal, or suicide doesn't run in my family, or drugs don't run in my family. It's not from I'm happy-go-lucky to I want to end things. There's this whole area that leads up to those things. How do we wake the world and say, let's just get to know ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. We're not healthy here. We're not sick here. It's all the in-between living that we do that's going to bring us to either side of that. And the first thing is what I call the honesty inventory, being true to yourself, that check into yourself, because at the end of it, it doesn't matter if you fooled the teacher, the parent, the boss, the anybody. It's being true to yourself. And by the time somebody gets to the place where they're in addiction, it means that you're reaching outside of yourself for something to make this feel better. So that's the first step. I have people that tell me, no, I'm an even keel. They're in the program, but they're like, I'm the most even keel person there are. And because you wouldn't be going outside of yourself for something if you were that even keel. So it's being honest to yourself. And then if there's any question at all, let's do some lab work, just like we would when we go to the doctor for our yearly physical. We're going to do a CBC. Here's the red blood cells. Here's the white blood cells. We're good to go or we're not good to go. That should be just as normalized of knowing where we are with our mental health objectively with data points from a lab.
With building a platform, I always have to be careful with how I word things, but also try to be bare naked truth. And you can cancel me if you want, but when it comes to abuse and sexual assault, that person that did the bad thing to you was probably a victim of something as well. Now, again, it does not justify that, but we are not a rehabilitating country. We're not getting to the core of the problem. They are probably battling with something too.
That's a great point. The saying hurt people, right? Let's let me retaliate and let you feel the pain that I've felt. That's again, I think, having these open kind of conversations for saying there's no shame in talking about your mental health.
Yeah.
If you've been hurt, let's talk about it. That's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, yet expecting a different result. That same wound is going to be there. So we've got to get to the bottom of it, and we've got to do the biopsychosocial, all of it in a triangle, the bio piece, your unique physiology, how that plays out with your psychology and your sociology, the world that you live in. We've got to look at all those pieces because we are that as humans.
Did I just study to be a doctor? Am I going to be able to call myself like doctor after this? And I think I have in a recording a couple of times that you said that I had good points and that I was right once or twice.
Absolutely.
Could I add that to my resume? I really enjoyed this conversation.
What I would say, David, is that what we're talking about here in this conversation from the physiological aspect exists. It's what we do. So to give people hope, to understand that you can actually get biomarkers, know where you're at, and then not just admire it. Now, what are we going to do about it? And we do that by looking at biochemical pathways and say, how come we're not getting to the end result of this the way we should? What do we need to do to enhance that, to get that working optimally? So I would like to leave your listeners with that there is hope. This does exist. Anyone, be it mental health condition, addiction, any place in between that, this is available. So use it. And we offer on our websites, wiredforaddiction.com, wiredbiohealth.com, 15-minute complimentary consultations. Our coaches will point you in the direction. We are here to help people. This is the future. We've got to do all of it. We have to know your unique physiology, how to best support that in talk therapy. And it all enhances each other and you as a person.
One thing that I find common with victims / survivors, and that I know what was very important to me, is I wanted to be in control again. I felt like everything was wiped out for me. And every time you speak and tell me about what you do, this is a very healthy way for me to take back control.
Absolutely. You know how many people say that? They're like, I can take control of my life back.
As we're logging off, do you want to give us a rundown on where we can find you?
Sure. Wiredforaddiction.com, wiredbiohealth.com. My TED Talk is Understanding the Biomarkers of Addiction. My name, Evelyn Higgins. We're here to help. The more people operate at the highest level they're capable of, we all win in the end.
I want to extend my deepest gratitude to our incredible guests for sharing their transformative journey with us today. Join us next week as we dive into the healing process and share more incredible stories of triumph and resilience.
Goodbye.